Hello and welcome to Risk at Work, Risk Connect's educational web series. I'm your host, Scott Fenstermaker. Today, we are talking about the future of risk tech, what the vision is going to look like for 2026. This is the perfect time to do this here at the end of the year. It's a great time to look back on the progression that we've had so far, take stock, see what the forces are, see if we can try and understand what the forces are currently shaping how risk tech is evolving, how it's evolved through the past year, and what we can expect out of 2026. And with us is the perfect person to talk about this. He's a person who needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. Before I get to that, though, a couple of housekeeping items as always. Number one, if you have a question for our guest today, please put it in the question field in your webinar software. If we don't answer that question during the course of our discussion today, we will reply to you directly with an answer from our guest today. Also, if you had indicated that you would like CPE credit for attending this webinar, please watch your inbox after we're done here today. We're going to send you a short 3-question quiz. You fill it out, send it back to us, and we will reply back to you with your CPE credit. All right, now I get to introduce a man that I'm sure most everybody on this audience already knows about. He is the founder and CEO of Red Hand Advisors. Before that, he was one of the founding members of the RIMIS business at Marsh. He is now the creator and co-author of the annual RIMIS report. I'm pleased to welcome back Pat O'Neill. Pat, how are you doing?
I'm good, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's always good to have you, Pat. I've loved speaking with you at Connect this year. Love continuing to have you come and give us such wonderful information when you join us.
Well, thank you. I had a great time at Connect. It was a great conference.
It was a cool.
Yeah,
We did have a cool session, didn't we?
you did.
It was a fun time.
Yeah, it was very much so.
All right, my man. Well, let's get into it. So we are gazing into the future, you and I. We are taking a
We are.
look at what risk software is going to be like in 2026, and of course, the expectation is here that everything we're going to say is 100% accurate and will come to pass because you are a soothsayer. Not too many people know this about you, but you have perfect clairvoyance. And so I can't wait to know what kind of flying cars and other kinds of risk-related software is going to come about in the following year. And I'm waiting for you to tell us.
Well, maybe there'll be a quiz at the end of the year on me. Would be a good way to start, see where we are next year. But I'm excited about this conversation. I love talking about risk tech. I like thinking about kind of where we're going. I spend a lot of time in the trenches, but when I'm
Hmm.
able to step back and see kind of where we're going and I think where we can get to, we're going to talk about a lot of different things today that I think are really exciting. Um, I don't know if they'll all be fully, mapped out by the end of 2026, but I think we have the opportunity, and I think the building blocks and foundations are in place to make 2026 really an exciting year for risk tech and for organizations that use these tools.
It was wonderful. So let's dive right in. I know you brought a lot of material with you, and you've got a lot to cover. So please take it away.
Yeah, great. So let's just maybe frame the conversation for today. I'm going to start by just giving kind of a brief overview of kind of where we are today, how organizations are using risk tech, kind of the state of risk tech, and then talk a little bit about what's shaping the future, what's driving it, why are we in a really, I think we're in an exciting point, inflection point in this space, and I do think with all the changes we've been seeing in the past year with technology and artificial intelligence, I think we're really set up well for what the future looks like. I'll paint a picture of what that is, and then give some practical advice on next steps, how organizations can take advantage of these technology innovations that are taking place that are coming down the road in risk tech. So that was kind of the how we'll approach this. And obviously, you check the questions, keep me honest, and ask me questions that you might have as well as we go along.
It'd be my pleasure.
Sounds good. So let's dive in. So let's start by just kind of defining where we are today. So risk tech, which is a component of the broader insurtech landscape, it can be defined in a number of different ways. My favorite word to use is fragmentation. This space is very fragmented. There's some great solutions in the marketplace. But they're very siloed per se. If you think about the space and the core platforms that we see in risk tech. It's everything from RMIS systems to claim and claim administration tools, GRC and ERM platforms, even safety and property tools. So there's a great deal of different technology platforms that kind of fall under this risk tech platform. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of the good and the bad and how these are being used in a minute. But there's a few other things going on today in the space. There's a proliferation of one-off solutions, particularly AI solutions. And we've seen this throughout the course of risk tech going back many, many years of kind of one-off bespoke solutions. But we've seen a real significant increase in that, particularly with the onset of AI and Gen AI tools of these one-off solutions that are appearing in the marketplace, solving very particular or specific use cases for organizations. And that can be good and bad. We'll get into that in a couple minutes. Unfortunately, to my point a moment ago about fragmentation, all of this leads to that. And on top of that, there's significant amount of use of spreadsheets still. Probably the least technology advanced solutions that are in the marketplace. But there's not many clients and customers that I deal with that spreadsheets don't play a role in kind of their risk technology environment. And that's something that I think we're going to continue to see addressed by the innovation that's taking place out there. So
Hey,
the big
let me
go ahead. Sure.
let me pause you on that because that's I mean that's one bullet, but that's a great place to highlight. So a lot of your customer and your clients, and I have to believe that your clients are going to tend to skew more sophisticated because they're actively
Sure.
looking for
Yeah.
betterment of their programs,
Right.
are still having spreadsheets as a component of what they do for their risk analysis. What do you see that as an effect of? Is that just the fact that the risk software that they use can get them 90% of the way there, but they still need to do some kind of last mile data computation in order to be able to get it to reportability? Is it just that their data internally is not clean, and so that they have to do some kind of manual manipulation to it? Where does it come from, really?
Yeah, so it's it's all of the above and a few more things, right? So
Okay.
I think it's taking it that last mile in some respects. It's also resting on processes that had been probably in place for a long time and they haven't
Mhm.
changed. So they'll do a lot of the heavy lifting in their core platform in their RMIS or the GRC platform, and then kind of export that out to Excel instead of building out reports. And some of it also is integration. So taking data from other sources and not per se bringing it into your core system, but integrating it in at the spreadsheet level. So not a great solution, but it's certainly why I think many organizations are still relying on it. And I also would say that just from an end user perspective, many professionals just feel more comfortable if given the choice between manipulating data in a spreadsheet or a pivot table versus building out a custom report in one of these
Right.
platforms.
Right,
So
right, right, right,
there's a
right.
lot of influences going on why spreadsheets are still so prevalent. And when we ask our questions in our RMIS report survey every year, spreadsheets still is one of the most overwhelming. If you ask them what tools they're using, check all that apply. Spreadsheets get everyone checks spreadsheets. They're all
Yes.
using them, and we're asking more than just kind of the just basic stuff you're using it for. People are using spreadsheets for, I would say, significant processes and use cases within their organization to manage risk.
Last question on this before we move
Yeah.
on. So you mentioned a lot of behavioral reasons why spreadsheets would still be around. In your opinion, how much is it a behavioral question and how much is it a budget question? How much is it as like, haha, you guys are lucky you still have salaries. There ain't no way I'm getting you anything more souped up than that versus I'm just comfortable being able to go in there, put my expertise right on the screen with Excel and do my thing.
Yeah, I think it's actually, I think is one, you have to pass one gate before the second. And what I mean by that is I think it's more internal, like comfortable with spreadsheets before you ever even get to the discussion about the investment
About how
portion
much
of
you
it.
can have.
I'm not
Sure.
saying I'm
Makes
not saying
sense.
the investment isn't holding back some of that, but you don't even have the investment conversation unless someone's willing to make that change and to really and move beyond the spreadsheets.
Yeah, fair
Makes
enough.
sense? Yeah.
It's
So what
totally.
yeah, so what all this kind of looks at, and again, there's some great solutions in the marketplace. There's lots of ways to approach managing risk, but it's fragmented. Data doesn't flow very well between different disparate systems. There's still a lot of manual processes that are going on. So that's kind of where we live today. Great solutions, not very connected.
Yeah, great.
And how they're being used, to get a little more specific or granular in this kind of process, if we look kind of at the broader areas of risk domains, traditional risk teams, insurance teams, they're focused on insurable risk. When we look at REMIS systems, most REMIS systems are being used primarily for insurable risk, managing claims at a high level. If you've got a TPA or a carrier involved, the renewal process, everything from capturing exposures to exporting data, tracking your COPE data for the market so that you can go through a renewal process, and then layering on top of that analytics and hopefully managing your total cost of risk. Claims teams using it more as a transactional system to take a claim from beginning to end, from first notice of loss through triage and payment and reserve processing. Safety teams, we're seeing a lot more initiatives. Historically, I've viewed kind of that safety, environmental health and safety space as much more operationally focused. But over the last couple of years, we've seen safety and EHS teams embracing technology as a more strategic tool for managing incidents, inspections, corrective actions, all those type of steps. And then obviously there's GRC tools that help you manage kind of at a kind of the broader risk profile for an organization, using risk registers, audits and controls, that type of stuff. So there's a lot going on. One of the data points from our survey earlier this year was and we were focused specifically on REMIS, being one of those core systems, how they're being used. Not surprised, right? You can see claims, big piece of that, all the way through, whether incident reporting, claims admin, if you're handling your claims yourself. And then still being used for policy, renewal, EH&S, and GRC. So all the components we just talked about. What's interesting to me is the future view. So how respondents to the survey said they plan to use this core system of theirs at this specifically REMIS, and big jumps coming in areas like EH&S and GRC. GRC, while it's still kind of on the lower tier, the jump expected in the next 24 months is more than 100%. So what it leads you to believe is that there's a shift going on in organizations, that they want to have everything kind of all together. Whatever that looks like, under one roof, having all their data, whether it's all in one domain. Yeah, I use the under one roof. Scott, I saw you got a little smile there. I wasn't paid to say that. It's the right way to think about it. Is there, and we're gonna talk about it. I'll tease it in a second. I'll tease it now, kind of talking about a connected ecosystem. They may not be thinking that way, but that's what their goal is, and that may not be the way they think about it. But we're going to talk about that's kind of where I feel like risk tech is going in 2026 and beyond.
Let me pause you right here. I just wanted to flesh out one thing, and this is just now occurring to me, but there were kind of two dimensions of what you said of how people use risk software, one of which has to do with breadth. Are we using GRC for ERM, KRI? Like, how much stuff are we using a thing for? But the other one you mentioned was how strategically versus granularly you're using a particular piece of software, right?
Right.
That's probably worth talking about for just a second, because that's not just taking a snow shovel and piling features into something. That's really integrating it not with another system, but with your top level decision making. Can you give me an example of kind of a two ways of thinking about a software, like how somebody might use a software in a strategic way versus perhaps in a more banal or tactical way?
Yeah, and I do think, Scott, it's a great question. I think many times organizations implement these systems for one or the other, even though in many cases the technology and the platforms can support both. So I think if you take claims as probably a good place to start. I think in many cases, REMIS or claim systems are initially implemented as more tactical solutions to help manage the day-to-day, whether you're actually administering the claims or just having an oversight of the claims process with your carrier and TPA, having kind of that real-time or near real-time data. But the idea that information can be used more strategically to manage outcomes on those claims, to manage and in a big picture, kind of where trends are coming from, where we can focus if we think more broadly outside of maybe one domain, how that affects what your safety initiatives are, how it affects going forward, what your renewals look like, and potentially decisions you make on your limits or deductibles that you may take, how much risk you take on as an organization. So I think many times, and I think you could pick almost any one of these domains on the screen, you can find areas where these tools are used for more tactical solutions, but more broadly speaking, can be used more strategically. That's not to say every system is built that way, but I think that's the way we need to be thinking about it. And that may mean different solutions for the different pieces. Some tools, particularly some of those standalone tools that I mentioned earlier, are very tactical in nature. They solve very specific use cases, but they connect, they have data that's important for the more strategic processes that organizations require. And I think what's really missing on the strategic piece, I think historically these tools are used much more operationally and not used or transactionally, whatever way you want to view it, less as a strategic tool, because it hasn't historically had all the pieces of data you need to be more strategic. And that's not that spreadsheets solve it, but that's one of the reasons people are in spreadsheets. They're trying to pull all this data together, may not be able to do it in their core platform.
Got it.
Make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, some of those pitfalls or things that are kind of holding us back, that organizations are focused on or feeling the pain right now. There's a couple that I think I see all the time. First is around requirements. During the process, if you're first implementing these systems, what we find is organizations they don't define their requirements well enough, that what they implement doesn't actually solve the problems that they need to tackle for their organization, or what the focus is, what they're trying to manage. They see cool tools. They think, hey, that's got to be able to solve the problem, and then they work backwards. So they work backwards from a solution, a product, to how it's going to actually meet the requirements they have. The second thing that happens is organizations undoubtedly change. They change very quickly. They change probably from the minute you implement, where you decide to use a product and you get to implementation and go live. Some of your priorities may have changed within your organization. There's certainly a lot of change going on in the risk world, that these products and your systems have to keep up with. Too many times that stops. So whether those shifting priorities after go live, or even not getting them right, that they're not aligned, and that's a big problem with these products, and that's why many organizations don't get all the benefits they can out of these systems. There's currently, even though we talk about this great space of integration, there's still a lot of integration challenges with technology. There's plenty of legacy products out there that don't really support true integration through APIs and more real-time integration between products. So that's still a challenge for a lot of organizations. And data is always the biggest issue. When I talk to vendors in this space around, what is the biggest complication in this process, the biggest issue that all organizations face is the quality of their data, having the right data, having clean data, and it becomes a bigger and bigger issue. And we'll talk about it in a few minutes when we get into this future state and the AI capabilities that are available. Data quality is so important. Last, adoption, it kind of goes hand in hand with some of the go live challenge that you have. But I think too many times organizations focus on the product changes, and they don't focus on what it's going to mean to the end user, right? Back to maybe our conversation about the spreadsheets a moment ago, that adoption, getting people to buy in on this process, and making sure that they're ready to take full advantage of these tools. That's why even when there's the opportunity sometimes to replace legacy processes that might be in older systems or in spreadsheets, that we sometimes only take it to that last mile per se, and still continue to we do our allocations at the end of the day in spreadsheets, even though that seems like a normal a slam dunk process that would be part of a RMIS application. So we still see a lot of that. And then while we've moved away from reporting and static reports in all these products, which is great, obviously those are still features of these tools. We've moved towards more dashboards, but at the end of the day, if those dashboards aren't driving decisions, they're really not providing the insights that we need. And as we get more comfortable with the kind of insights that AI-driven tools can provide, static dashboards are going to go the way, I believe, are going to go the way of static reports have over time, and more of an interactive approach to the way we use artificial intelligence that is embedded within the products that we use. So that's some of the pain points that organizations are facing today, even without kind of taking that next step on some of the great technology that's coming towards us. So what's forcing the change, or what's happening in the change? And there's a couple of drivers here. Historically speaking, when we look at risk tech, there's usually certain dynamics that are driving the change in the space. Sometimes it's the risk environment, what's going on with risk, are costs going up, and organizations are trying to manage that. And other times it's technology that's driving the change. Right now, I believe we've got all of the above, which is a great place to be. It means that there's a lot of innovation going on, but there's a lot of forces at work right now, from AI and automation. I'm going to talk a little bit more detail about that in a moment. This whole concept of data ecosystems that I briefly touched on a moment ago, and I'm going to talk in a lot more detail about that as well in a moment. But on top of that, we have this whole the other side of the coin of the regulatory and governance pressures that come along with these more advanced technologies. As we talk about AI, many organizations have started use cases and pilots in AI, and what they're finding is, organizations are trying to manage that process. We want to try to understand and what are these tools doing, how they're operating, showing more transparency. You've heard we talk a lot about kind of the black box of AI, right? We put inputs in, and we get outcomes. And then the question is, well, how did it come to those decisions, and can we trust them? And what's the governance around it? This is where the data piece becomes really, really important. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, when I said there's a lot of forces at play right now, there's just the expanding risk dynamics in our world are pretty significant. And again, the risks that organizations have been traditionally managing are really changing pretty significantly. So let's dive into the AI one, and give a little more context to that. There's a great deal going on. I'm sure everyone here is experimenting with and seeing capabilities in AI, particularly Gen AI, across their platforms. We're starting to see many of those being built into these core systems, which is really exciting. AI can support really many processes in all of these different disciplines, whether it's triaging claims, making predictive analytics, figuring out litigation predictions, or helping setting reserves, identifying fraud. There are so many opportunities for AI to play a role. And it's great to see. I feel like every day we see new use cases that are being developed and designed. A lot of this is coming from that one-off solution space that I mentioned at the beginning, right? These one-off solutions that now AI and analytics are giving us capabilities that we didn't have before, to solve for things that people have either been doing manually or doing kind of through multiple systems. We're starting to see a lot of that, which is really good. The other thing that's really exciting, and I think this is maybe one of my dreams, Scott, for the risk, particularly for the RIMS space. And I started to see some of this. I saw some of this at the Connect conference. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the concept of copilots, right? You've got Microsoft has if you use the Microsoft tools you're comfortable with, excuse me, and familiar with how the concept of a copilot. The fact is, we're going to see copilots as part of really all the I would expect all the technologies we use in everyday life and all the things we're doing. So instead of running reports and using menus and moving around, I think we're going to find that these copilot type features are going to be the way we guide through. They're going to replace the concept of the dashboards. And so I'm excited to see co-pilots in these core systems we talked about, where we're interacting with the system through a chatbot or a co-pilot that you have an idea. Hey, I want to look at where are my risk leaders, where are my biggest risks, where are potentials for mitigating risk, and the system is then using the data that's in the system to help make those decisions. We're not looking at static dashboards or doing what if scenarios and reports like, let's see what kind of cause of losses are out there. Instead, asking the system, what are our largest losses? What should we be focused on? Who are the locations that are the highest risk for our organization? Those are the kind of things that are, I think, really exciting. One more data point from our survey. This was a question, again, we asked earlier this year, so it's in AI. This is almost ages ago, but where organizations were in AI adoption. And not surprisingly, at the beginning of this year, much more early stage, pilot type programs, not a lot of implementation or even fully implemented. And many organizations, depending on who was responding, not sure where they were. Some of that comes with one of the things I found talking to organizations is that many of them are waiting for these tools to come from their core applications. So just like we waited for Microsoft to release Copilot before we started, having it help us write emails and Word documents, we're waiting for these tools to become part of our core application and use them kind of on a day-to-day basis. So we're starting to see more of that. And because of that, I expect that when we do this survey at the early part of 2026, we're going to see a pretty significant jump in this, particularly from those organizations that were in those early stages or pilots they're going to be somewhere in the implementation or fully implemented. And it's not a one and done, right there, but I expect we're going to see more adoption of AI across organizations when we look at this in a year, because the AI landscape changes so quickly.
Mhm.
The next one, and the one I'm probably going out on a ledge on the most here for 2026, but I do think it's achievable, is the idea of moving to a broad data ecosystem. And what I mean by that is, historically speaking, we've relied on those tools that I mentioned earlier, RMIS platforms, GRC platforms, safety tools, just to use those as kind of maybe the core platforms for different risk domains, as kind of single systems that you would select for your particular domain, and you'd expect it to do everything that kind of fits in your space, or hope it would do everything. Where I think we're moving is a much broader connected, and we have the ability, I know we have the ability to do this, a more connected ecosystem, so that specialized tools are connected, so that we could have two domains. We could have a risk domain that uses a RMIS and a safety domain that uses a safety tool or safety platform, but that they're interconnected, that they're connected real time through APIs, that we're sharing data, that the whole process is seamless, that the integration is easy, right? It's no code. It's not static data transfers and overlap of data. That's where we're moving. And it gives the opportunity as well. There's an interesting place to be. If I can go back for a minute and talk about that ecosystem of AI and one-off solutions that are out in the marketplace there's new ones being added every single day. Historically speaking, when we had those kind of technology innovations in different phases of risk over the last 10 or 15 years, you would see new tools come about, and it would almost be like proof of concept, right? Is it something that makes sense? Is it solving a problem? And what would happen if it actually stuck is that either that would become a standalone product that a lot of people would use. But if you ask users, they want one place to go. They don't want to be using multiple systems. We hear that loud and clear in our surveys. So you would find integrations would be done with those tools. Maybe not the most innovative innovations, maybe not through APIs, but that they're pulling data. Many of those need data. So where's your data warehouse? It's going to be your RMIS or your GRC system. They're connecting to that. And the other thing would happen is organizations like Risk Connect might acquire one of those businesses. They might develop same functionality. And so we'd see this kind of come and go of technology, of these kind of one-off solutions. I think with the rise of this broader ecosystem and the opportunity for true integration, I think there's a space for those solutions to thrive, so that if they can connect to these broader infrastructures, these broader ecosystems, that you can solve kind of bespoke solutions or bespoke problems with these solutions, right? So that I wouldn't expect any vendor to be able to solve every problem for every organization. Sometimes the solutions are very specific to an industry or to a business, the way they operate. But if there was a solution out there that solved a particular problem, to be able to connect it to this ecosystem and to share real time, to be able to move between these systems very easily. And also, if we talk about the transactional versus the strategic, in some cases, that one tool might be the place that you as a user, that might be where you live. but that you're gaining access to the broader set of data. Others that use it more strategically are gaining access to that same data, to the results of what you're using. So I think it creates a really interesting place to be. The other thing I'll say, which I think is really interesting, I've been in technology my whole career, is we used to have the conversation about build versus buy. And many years ago, it was more of a build was the way you would get everything. And not to say it was always the right solution, but if you really wanted a bespoke solution to your organization, or as I hear from most organizations, we're different than everybody else. You would build, and that it was expensive. That it had lots of other problems that we don't have time to talk about today. And as technology's improved and systems have gotten more configurable, I stay away from the word customizable, but very highly configurable. We've moved much easier. The conversation about build versus buy is buy, right? Or license or lease. And the build thing has kind of become something that's really not that prevalent. But I actually think that this whole ecosystem gives that opportunity for build as well. So not at the core platform, I still don't think that's the right decision, because these core platforms we're talking about that can be the central hub for an ecosystem have so many tools already built in. The capabilities of the Risk Connects of the world are significant, but that you could plug in something you build internally to solve a very specific problem that is specific to your workflows, to your needs, and work on an integrated basis. So I think we're in a place where build and buy could live hand in hand with each other, which I think is really interesting.
It's interesting. So you mentioned that you were going out on a limb. That I actually don't perceive you to be going out on as much of a limb as all that, because this is important not just for the kind of being able to plug and play different types of solutions into your risk data, including solutions that haven't even been invented yet, number one. But this is important for your AI conversation too, right? We're now getting used to the idea of an AI being able to see our stuff from any system, right? Go to my emails and go to my documents. And in fact, that's fine until you start calculating stuff, right? Until you want any kind of consistency with your calculation. Then you're still in a data integrity problem, right? The
Right.
calculations are only going to be as good as your data. So you're going to have at some point data you can trust. AI can help you a little bit about that, organizing it and cleaning it and so forth, but it's not going to be able to just layer onto dirty data that's disparate and be able to get you the consistent types of calculations you want. You're going to need this kind of data warehousing. You're going to have to solve the hard data problem no matter what you do for any of these applications, right?
No, you're completely right. And I do think that AI does give us the opportunity to, we talk about data being a big piece of the AI puzzle. AI can help you with some of the data. The fact that it can mine all your data, not just the data that's in kind of drop down fields, which is great. But it can't solve the problem for missing data. And so
Yeah.
being able to connect all the different pieces, again, I think there is a place in this ecosystem for one-off solutions that solve problems, but we need to connect and be able to share data amongst them, because they probably can't operate in a vacuum on their own. They're going to need data. They're going to need information from the broader ecosystem as well, whether that's location data or policy information, or your risk profile, so that it understands what we're trying to accomplish. So there's really, I hope I'm not going. I don't think I'm going out on a limb, Scott, but I do think that I think the tools will be there. I think it takes time to implement these, and we're going to talk about that at the end. So I think the complete everyone seeing this all the way to the end is probably not a realistic point, but these type of steps can take place in 2026. The tools are there to do that. So what does that look like? So talk a little bit of kind of what this a connected risk operating system would look like. We'd be operating under a core or core systems, and it could be more than one, that are fully integrated, that have, I would say, have a unified data model, so that it easily is sharing data. If there's going to be reasons to have the same data in multiple places in some cases, that it's always kind of syncing up, right? We don't want to be keeping kind of one-off copies of our data. I'd expect that on top of that, we're going to see many of these one-off connections are going to be AI-driven solutions that are analyzing your data and giving you outputs, helping you figure out and provide insights. So that's a big piece of it. But I think at the core of this, likely, It could be, obviously, it could be a built data warehouse, but I think it's more likely to be your core RMIS or GRC platform is going to be kind of the hub for all of this. We're already seeing in this marketplace, I'm seeing it with Risk Connect and other tools, the ability to do this integration. It's typically not right now, the core systems are not the integration bottleneck. The bottleneck is with these one-off either legacy solutions that you might want to connect, or some of these one-off solutions that have built some great solutions but haven't got around to the API portion of it, right? They want data feeds, but they don't want to provide data back. And I think that will change. I think if they want to be successful, they will start to change that. And then I think it gets to our conversation. We kind of talked about this already, but it gets to a place where these tools can support both the tactical as well as the strategic decisions, depending on, again, what domain you're in and what your role is. There are going to be users that need the tactical solutions, and there's going to be users that need the more strategic solutions, and it's all coming from one centralized operating system. So that's what's really exciting. So a little bit, maybe a little techie, but what does this look like for an organization? Because we're talking now about multiple systems, multiple platforms. It actually gives you the ability, I think, to be more flexible and agile in the process. So if you think about that core platform at the bottom that's kind of managing the data. On top of that, you'd have the user experience, the engagement layer. That might be the platform itself if you're using the core capabilities, but it's more likely going to be other ways you're going to access that data through mobile apps, chatbots, more of an interactive approach to using those tools, co-pilots, portals, depending on your user access, or it could be these third-party solutions we talked about. And on top, then below that is the process layer. So this is where the core systems actually come into place, or these one-off solutions that actually take care of what are the process, what are the core workflows that we're trying to solve for, and that they're focused on that. So they're building and they're specific to the workflows that are required for claims or ERM or safety. Above that, this isn't kind of stacked the way I look. I was thinking the way people use it as I kind of laid out this slide, but there's an analytics layer that potentially goes across all of these tools and accesses the data, so that the analytics tool is providing, the predictive modeling, the reporting, the scenario planning, the BI tools that we're used to, so that you can move from just pure data to more of insights and recommendations. And then the part that no one cares about, but's important, is that integration layer, right? So all the things we talked about already, having the APIs, excuse me, and the data models, so that all the data flows consistently and securely. That's very important. All of this gets us to a point of enabling organizations to innovate rapidly, right? So that if we're looking for specific solutions, we're looking for ways to plug in. I kind of envision for folks that I think most people are familiar with how iPhones and that whole process operates. If you think of kind of the App Store on your phone and all the different things, you go to the App Store and you look for particular apps and you download them. I see the same concept. I wouldn't maybe call them apps, but this interconnected world where, okay, I've got this ecosystem I built. I have my core platform. Now I want to plug something else into that. So what are those tools I want to go solve for X? And I don't expect that my core RMIS provider or GRC provider is going to build that out. It's very specific to maybe my space or my process, but I'm pretty sure something probably exists out there that does that. And finding that and plugging it in. It also makes it really simple or easier that if something doesn't work well, that you don't have to throw the whole thing out. And that's why the decision process on the core is important, because it needs to have the flexibility and the integration capabilities. But the one-off solutions can very easily be swapped in and out. You don't want to be doing that all the time. There's a lot of investment in that process, but it's a lot easier than throwing out the entire system, which is what we've seen historically when these systems kind of go through their evolution of maybe not having the most advanced tools, that you have to throw the whole thing out and start over. And if done properly, you don't have to do that anymore. So a little bit about the market and kind of what we're seeing in the marketplace. We're certainly seeing a lot of innovation. I think this is one of those times, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of dynamics that are in place right now, are going on right now. But the fact that there's so much technology innovation going on, this is what we're seeing in the market from providers. There certainly is platform consolidation, not as much as I think we've seen in the past. But there's so much innovation going on. That's I think the exciting thing. We're seeing it from the core platforms, the Risk Connects of the world. We're also seeing it from kind of these niche providers, building out things that weren't even possible. Scott, right to your point a moment ago, like we didn't even know what we were having to solve for, or we were doing it. When I go through these processes with clients and trying to solve. I try to tell people to stay away from the technology. Forget about what you've seen. Forget about what you think is possible. What are you solving for? What are the important use cases? What are the things that keep you up at night? What are the things that are done completely outside of the system? And more importantly, maybe what are the data points that you don't have to be able to do your job? And then let's see if we can figure out how we solve for those problems. So I think, I've talked about them a couple of times already, these AI innovations. I think they're really driving a lot of amazing solutions that didn't exist even 2 years ago. AI is moving so quickly. The other exciting thing that I've seen, the brokers and carriers and anyone who's been in the REMIS space knows, the brokers were big into the REMIS space for many years and then divested and kind of stayed away, I'd say, from technology solutions. We're seeing that change now. They're not getting back into the REMIS business per se, but we're seeing a lot of really interesting solutions coming, particularly from brokers, but I would also say from carriers and TPAs that are providing analytic solutions. I think the question for those tools is how do they integrate into this broader ecosystem? Because they aren't going to be, in my opinion, the core platforms that we're talking about for most organizations. I think they're one of the plugins to the process. Most of them or many of them need data from markets. They need data from client-specific data for their models to run. We've got to make that seamless, but they're doing some really interesting innovation. And I think I've talked to many customers who are starting to use those tools, but are trying to figure out how can I make it easier? How can I integrate that with my REMIS system so that I can still get these analytic capabilities on a real-time basis where the data is always being updated. So that's a big piece. The other thing I would say is from a end user point of view, thinking about I said this a moment ago, thinking about those core systems. If you're going to go through a process or you're evaluating your current core platform, you really should think, is it built for the future? I guess I'm less concerned about every single little feature, and I know for individual users those are important. But you really have to consider, is the platform built to be that hub for you? Is it built to be that operating core system that's going to easily interconnect with all the other tools, the broker tools we're talking about, these niche AI solutions that are in the marketplace, things you may choose to build yourself? That to me is one of the most important things you have to consider when evaluating your current system, or if you're looking to switch and you're going through that process, that has to be high on the list, that it not just checks boxes and gets specific features, but that it is built for the future to be that central hub for you.
How do you teach people to evaluate that? Is that you mentioned data integration? That's going to be a very important facet of that, but I assume there's more facets. When you advise people how to evaluate whether or not a system is going to be built for the future as they're looking, how do you coach them through that?
Yeah, part of it is many organizations have already been through this process once before, maybe multiple. And so trying to understand how they got to where they are today, that while it solved a particular problem, that maybe they weren't thinking of kind of the bigger picture. It's also kind of lining up, I think, particularly with artificial intelligence, it's becoming really interesting to see kind of the haves and the have-nots.
Mhm.
That sometimes the underlying technology was not a really deciding factor for many organizations, because it was kind of it was there. They weren't the techie. They didn't get it. The system did their job, and not everyone still doesn't get it. But it's more top of mind now, and it's more in your face, because the AI is part of the way it solves these problems, right? We used to talk about workflows, and hey, all these systems can build great workflows. We can go from point A to point B to point C. But what if we could go from point A to point Z with AI that would guide the process and make intelligent decisions for you, and less, not completely human out of the loop, but less touch points in the process? That is something that an end user can see when comparing solutions, right? That,
Mhm.
this is kind of not, oh, well, I guess that's the old school way to do it. And the new school way is this. Doesn't mean you have to turn all those things on. But again, having the ability that the platform is flexible enough. So I think it's become, I mean, I educate my clients on this all the time, but I also think it's become more interesting. And I have clients who will say, oh, that was an interesting demo. They didn't really talk a lot about artificial intelligence. And that's an interesting, that's a warning sign to me that that's not part. It shouldn't be the whole part of it. Shouldn't be the whole part. But the reality is AI has now become it's integrated into kind of all the things we're doing. And then specifically when you're in your core RIMIS platform or whichever platform you're using, you should be seeing that integration of AI across all the different parts of the system. Whether you turn on or off those things is going to be dependent on your specific workflows and your use cases, but you need to be able to see that's available. That makes sense?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So there are some things that get in the way. We talked about what was holding people back currently. I think if you think about this future state, there's some other common pitfalls. So one of them, some of them are the same. Weak data. I think that's a big piece of it. Many of the AI needs assessment processes that I've been through with organizations, we figure out those use cases. And then the next step is, do we have the data to support these use cases? And so there's a lot of data cleansing that needs to take place. There's a lot of saying, hey, where are we going to get the data from? Again, that comes back to this ecosystem conversation because typically missing data is somewhere in the organization. So how do we connect it? And beyond, I will just to add to that, I didn't mention it before, but one of the pieces of the ecosystem, if you think about kind of external or not third party, but external data to the risk domain, are other data from your organization. So connecting to your HR systems and your ERP systems and pulling in all the data that gives you a picture of your organization. Those are a lot of times the data that's missing, and being able to connect that on a real-time basis. Again, all the systems have to be able to talk to each other, and that's where we're going. The other pitfall when I've seen people kind of get going down this road is trying to do too much immediately, trying to boil the ocean, so to speak, right? There's a lot of risk in that. And you invest a great deal before you ultimately find out if it's working or not working. And while we all want to get to the end point as quickly as possible, it's much better to go through this process kind of on an iterative basis, kind of taking phased approach, maybe even kind of doing some low hanging fruit and having some success along the way. That's a big part of it. Change management. I talked about that at the beginning about whole, kind of, having that drop off after implementation and go live. But I'll bring it up for AI as a separate topic, which is many people, and we see this all the time. It's talked about on the news. People are worried about what AI means to their job, right? And so as you build out these new tools that have AI, are AI enabled, AI infused, users and stakeholders are going to be worried about how that affects what they do. And so change management can't be underestimated. They have to be part of the process. That's always a big thing I bring up, is having set of stakeholders that represent the whole kind of all levels of the organization, so that you get the buy-in and that they can see how these tools can elevate their job and not replace them. That's a big piece of it. And then finally, just the misalignment of tech and business priorities, right? I mentioned this earlier, starting with business priorities and then figuring out what the solution and the technology is. That's the process. There's too much misalignment of saying this is a really good tech solution, but ultimately, is it really solving the problem? Will it work within our organization? What are those use cases? I know it's exciting to get new technology in place, but you really have to understand what are you trying to solve for first. A little bit of a roadmap for 2026 for folks on this call. And I think I just mentioned a few of those in my common pitfalls, but figure out what those use cases are. I would say start with some high value ones, but ones that you can start to see some impact, so that you can see the results. Sometimes we start with low hanging fruit just so that we can prove out how this is going to work, because there's a lot of work that's involved. Sometimes the bigger high value use cases have a lot of investment that need to take place. There's a lot of data that needs to be cleaned up or accessed. Start with something where you can start making an impact. Definitely start considering. I think it's kind of one of those things that people kind of leave behind, which is the data governance process. That kind of starts solving the problem of all the data issues we're talking about. Having kind of a foundation of where the data is coming from, who the data owner is, what data do we need, so that if there are missing pieces, we can identify where we might be able to get that data. Um, Start thinking about that. I think a big part is start thinking about, do you have the core platform to start building this ecosystem? And if you don't have that, that's probably the first place to start, because the one-off solutions are only going to do you so much good if you don't have a way to fully integrate them, and you're just going to be further down the line before you ever get to a point where you could actually start building out this ecosystem. So I would encourage folks to really evaluate if the platform you're on today is something that you can grow with for the next 5 or 10 years. And even though we don't know what that looks like, that it has the right architecture, it's on modern technology, it's completely API enabled, so that
Yeah.
when you find other tools, you can bring those in. Execute in phases. I talked about that earlier. We don't want to boil the ocean here, and just making sure that you're measuring as you're going along. What are these solutions working? This whole plug and play idea gives you the opportunity that you can be plugging things in. Hey, does that work for us? It doesn't. Let's try another solution. Is there something better for us? Again, not having to replace the entire ecosystem, but plugging in specific solutions, where I think that's where it gets really exciting. I think if you follow this general roadmap, I think it gets you on the right path. And I think it gives you the opportunity to be much more successful in this your broader managing of risk in this. There's just some great things going on in risk tech, and I think organizations just need to start taking advantage, but planning properly going through this process. So I'll wrap up, Scott, and then
Yeah.
time for questions. Just maybe a couple of things we talked about, and to drive home again. Risk tech's changing. It's changing very quickly, just like all technology. And we're all familiar with what's going on with artificial intelligence and technology. But risk tech is moving and it's shaking. There's some great stuff going on, but you got to think about this. Is broadly speaking, these tools are going to start being ability to be connected. You need to be able to take advantage of that. AI is becoming prevalent throughout processes in your organization. This isn't just kind of one-off solutions. They need to be integrated into everything you do across your organization, so more horizontally across your workflows. Um, the risk landscape is obviously changing. You should be considering all your risk when you're thinking about these platforms and these solutions, and not just kind of coming from a RIMS guy. That it's not just your insurable risk. That's not the only things you should be worrying about. I won't beat up on the data and the governance much more, but that's a huge part of this. And I do think with the right, I think a lot of this is achievable. I'm not sure I'd get 100% score at the end of next year, Scott, on where we are, but I think the industry, the risk tech as a whole, is getting there. These are the kind of things we're seeing. It's at individual level and what systems you're using. There, a lot of this. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot to change. So I wouldn't expect that everyone will have every one of these boxes clicked off, and everyone will have a risk ecosystem structure in place. But the foundational elements are there to start moving in that direction.
Yeah. I think that sounds absolutely, from my layman's knowledge, a fairly prescient and spot on assessment. As we were talking about earlier, AI doesn't get you around the hard data
Oh,
problem. It will help you solve the hard data problem, but I think we have time for one question as we're wrapping up here, and that actually inspires a thought about what AI replaces versus what it coaches or helps you with. In other words, one of the areas where people have run into unexpected problems using new LLM technology or generative technology is by trying to replace human beings outright. And you can hear stories upon stories of that. Where I have personally gotten a lot of value out of it, probably the most value out of it, is as a teaching aid, right? Or as a way to become a better professional, more elevated professional. I can see, for example, somebody using an LLM-enabled claims platform, for example, to
Sure.
start asking the strategic questions that perhaps they weren't asking before. So, claims and RIMS is where all your incidents are, right? So, the moment somebody types into a prompt, what do these last year's incidents tell me about what controls I should start putting
Mhm.
into my ERM risk register in order to be able to lower our total cost of risk, or however you wanted to do, right? Now we actually start have an avenue of starting to be able to have a forum to ask these strategic questions. Do you have any
Right.
reflections on how this kind of AI enablement or technological enablement can help make risk professionals better professionals?
Yeah, I think your example is great because I do think the tools that have come out of kind of this Gen AI space are much more that they're much more tools that enable a user to be more efficient, more effective. Depending on how much you've invested in how the platforms are built, they learn. They learn about you. They learn about your organization. They learn about about your framework. So if you've got a risk framework, it understands that risk framework, and when you pose simple questions, I found that I've spent a lot of time learning and understanding how to write prompts, and I've learned the more the product these tools learn how you operate, the less sophisticated your prompts have to be because
Exactly.
it's that's built in. I don't have to
Mhm.
keep telling them that I'm a RIMS expert. They know I'm a RIMS expert, and it takes that into account, or it knows what my framework is on how I go about projects. Where I think, to the beginning of your question, where I think it has the ability to replace is kind of more at that transactional level, right? Um, Things that if you put it, if you ask someone, do you really want to be the person who's approving, the claim going from this spot to this, that it's assigned to this user, that it's a claim that should be automatically, a record only claim that can be automatically closed based on certain parameters. I wouldn't expect people lose sleep over losing those type of functions, but
Yeah.
being able to do my job more effectively. One of the really really cool ideas or really cool things I've seen, and it's so simple, but using Gen AI capabilities on a claim, looking at all that data. So I've heard lots
Yeah.
of different percentages, but they say that 70 to 80% of claims data lives
Is
in notes,
unstructured.
lives in
Yeah.
documents, unstructured data. It's not in those fields like cause and nature of injury and all that good stuff. Well, those are good stuff, but um, things that you couldn't historically, if you've got a significant claim that has a long tail and has dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of notes and attachments, you have no idea what the true picture is unless you're living and breathing that claim. And in most cases, people have a lot of claims on their desk and just can't live that. Being able to have a tool like a Gen AI tool that can summarize that data, that will give you kind of a current picture of where you are, bring out the most important things, but also be able to ask it a question at any time. Say, I think we talked to a specialist about this claim once, or we talked to a lawyer, but I don't see it anywhere. I don't have it marked as in litigation. And you ask the co-pilot, and it says, yeah, in your note a year and a half ago, you talked to an outside counsel about this
Right.
claim, and here was the recommendation they made. And that helps. One, it helps you even if you are the same adjuster, that you have all that. You can't retain all of that, but there's also more likely that there's been handoffs in that process, and so
Mhm.
that someone can pick up that whatever that workflow that's going on and be able to understand. That's where I think you can really elevate the way people are operating. And it's another tip I give general users, which I think applies to this conversation, and I'm hoping we're probably a lot further along here at the end of 2025 than we were at the beginning, which is, if you're not experimenting and using tools like ChatGPT, I'll just use that one as an example because it's the one I use almost every day. Start doing that. Help it improve your emails. Let it help write letters for you. Help it answer basic questions that it can do the research of your own information. Um, that's when you really start to see what the possibilities are. So I'd encourage individuals to do that, along with the broader recommendations we made for organizations. It's probably good timing that you had one question, Scott, as I lose my
Right,
voice.
exactly. So that's a great place to leave it, Pat. So thank you very much for all this wonderful information. I've learned a ton. I appreciate you being here. We appreciate all of you being here. We will see you for our next installment of Risk at Work. Take care.